Our story today is called Grandfather Counts by Andrea Chang. In this story, Helen's grandfather comes from China to stay with her family in their home in the United States. Grandfather speaks Chinese, but not English. Helen speaks English, but not Chinese. Why might this be difficult for each of them? You can see the characters here. This is Grandfather, and this is Helen. Gong Gong. Grandfather was one of the last people off the plane. He walked slowly toward the crowd waiting at the terminal. Ba, 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 Mum shouted. His eyes lit up and he looked in our direction. Mum ran over and hugged him. Dad, Henry, Cece, and I stood back waiting. Finally, I went closer. Gong Gong patted my head and smiled. Then he said something to me. I looked to Mum for help. Gong Gong says you look very nice, Mum explained. Thank you, I said. Gong Gong kept talking to me in Chinese. When he realized I didn't understand, he turned to Mum, a look of surprise on his face. I wanted to explain that Mum had tried to teach us Chinese. She had gotten us Chinese flashcards with words and pictures. Once she sent us to Chinese Sunday school, but we didn't want to go back. The kids there already spoke Chinese. They were learning to write characters, and we couldn't understand anything they said. So what do you know about Grandfather and Helen's mum from this beginning? Think about what you know about them. On the way home, everyone was quiet. Gong Gong dozed next to me. I watched him and wondered what he was dreaming. Did he dream in Chinese? When we got home, Mum took Gong Gong to his room and shut the door. He's tired, she said. Let him rest. It had been my room, a small back room, just big enough for a bed and small desk. From the window, I could see the railroad tracks that ran along the back of the house to places I could only imagine. To get ready for Gong Gong's arrival, we had moved my bed into Cece's room. Her room faced the street. No tracks, no train cars to count as they sped by. We put up wallpaper in my room, green with small dots. Mum said it would hide the cracks caused by the rumbling of the trains going by. I miss those cracks all connected and spreading out from the middle like the branches of a tree in winter. Mum got upset when the last sheet of wallpaper wrinkled near the ceiling. Dad tried to smooth it with his fingers, but it just creased more. It looks okay, I said. No one will see it way up there. Mum wasn't sure. When you do a job, always do it right, she said. Gong Gong told me that when I was 4, and he was teaching me to write my name. He said my name was my family. I shouldn't scribble it any old way. But I was little, and it was hard to make the strokes of the Chinese characters right. I got this picture in my head of Mum as a 4-year-old trying to write with a paintbrush full of lumpy wallpaper paste instead of an ink brush. I started to laugh, but I could see that Mum didn't think there was anything funny going on. Helen, Mum said, annoyed, go find something else to do. Suddenly, I felt a lump in my throat. Why was Mum in such a bad mood? All because of Gong Gong? Why does he have to come anyway? I cried. And take my room. Mum looked surprised at me. Then she said quietly, He's my father. It's my duty to take care of him. I didn't want to listen. I ran down the stairs, out the door, and down the path towards the railroad tracks. What is the problem so far? Why do you think Helen is feeling the way she is? After Gong Gong first tried to speak to us at the airport, he didn't say much to anyone. Cece drew him a picture of flowers and butterflies. He smiled at her and handed the picture back. It's for you, Cece said, but Gong Gong didn't understand. So I taped the picture to the door. Then he understood. He nodded and smiled at Cece again. See, he does like it, I told her. One by one, Gong Gong read through the Chinese newspapers he had brought with him. Mum tried to get him to go out, but most of the time he just shook his head and went back to his reading. What will Gong Gong do when he finishes all his newspapers? I asked Mum. Give him time, said Mum. He has so many new things to get used to. How do you think Gong Gong is feeling about all of these changes in his new place? Since I couldn't see the train from Cece's room, I waited for it out back on the concrete wall. Sometimes I saw Gong Gong looking down at me from my old room. Soon I realized he wasn't looking at me at all. He was waiting for the train. When the engineer waved to me, Gong Gong reached out and waved back too. Early one evening, I was sitting in the concrete wall, waiting for the train, when I saw Gong Gong coming down the path. He sat down next to me, his legs hanging over the wall, just like mine. We could feel the train coming before we heard the low rumble. Then there it was. E, sun, se, wu, li, chi, ba, said Gong Gong, holding up a finger for each car that went by. I liked the way his voice went up and down softly with each word. The engineer waved from the last car, and then the train was out of sight. Gong Gong said the first word again and looked at me, waiting. I repeated the word, holding up one finger to match his. E? I said. 1. I got it. Slowly Gong Gong said all the numbers up to 8, and I repeated them. We started over and practiced until I could say them all by heart. Gong Gong clapped for me. Then I held up one finger and said 1. 1, Gong Gong repeated after me. Before long, he could count to 8 in English. You did it, I said. Gong Gong took my hands in his and gave them a quick squeeze. I found a small piece of broken concrete and used it to write Helen on the wall. Helen, I said, pointing to what I had written. Helen, Gong Gong repeated, tracing the letters with his finger. Then he picked up a piece of concrete and wrote 2 Chinese characters on the wall. Gong Gong, he said, pointing to the characters. He took my hand and helped me copy his name. Notice what is happening. What do you think might happen next? Let's keep reading. Just then, I saw Henry and Cece coming down the path. I've called you a million times, said Henry. Come on, it's time for dinner. Sorry, I said. We didn't hear you. Gong Gong and I were busy. We walked up the path together. Sun, I said, counting my steps. 4, 5, 6, Gong Gong said, counting where I left off. At dinner, Dad told us about a new computer program for learning languages. A friend at work had given him a copy of the Chinese version. Dad said it was really great. It starts out real simple, Dad explained. The voice says Shu Hai, and then you click on the picture of the children. Shu Hai, Gong Gong repeats. He smiled and gave Dad a thumbs up. Then Gong Gong looked at me. Shu Hai, he said. It was my turn to give him a thumbs up. Hey, Mum, what's my Chinese name again? I asked. In Hua, Mum replied. Gong Gong gave you your name when you were born. Gong Gong, I said, pointing to myself, and I repeated, In Hua. Gong Gong nodded. Then he pointed to Cece and Henry. In when? In Ray. Hey, we're all in something, said Cece. Yes, because you're all in the same family, said Mom. And you're all the same generation. Cool, said Henry. Can you see in these pictures that all the people are happy and smiling? What's making them feel happy now? And how have they changed from the beginning of the story?